This is the sewing tutorial for the Make with Mandy Mia dress. You will already have cut out your pattern pieces. Let's begin by adding stay stitching around the front and the back neck. This is a stitch which is around 1/2 centimetre away from the raw edge of the neckline. This will help to prevent your neckline from stretching while you are handling the fabric. The fabric that we're using here is a viscose, so as you know it's quite drapey and slippy, so the stay stitch will really help you to keep the neckline in shape. Secondly, let's stitch the darts. So fold your fabric, lining up the notches at the waistline and locating the end point of the dart, which you should have marked from your pattern. Do this on both of the back pieces and neatly finish at the end of the dart point. You do not need to add a back stitch when finishing at the end of your dart point. Just run your stitching off the fabric and this will ensure that you don't have any puckering at the top of your dart. Now repeat this action on the front bodice panel. Once you have sewn your darts, press the darts towards the side seams away from the centre of the bodice. With right sides together, place tier 1 onto the waist seam and sew along the waist edge. Repeat this action along the back, attaching tier 1 to the back waist seam of the bodice. Once you have completed this action, overlock this waist seam and press the seam downwards away from your neckline. Now, overlock the shoulders, the front and back bodice side seams, the bodice centre back and the centre back of tier 1, the sides of tier 1, 2 and 3, and all of the edges of the pocket bags. Also overlock the sleeve underarms and the neck facing outer edges. Now let's begin by inserting the invisible zip. For best results you will need to use an invisible zip foot. Lay your invisible zip upside down on the right side of the fabric along the centre back. Position the plastic top of the zip 2 centimetres down from the neck edge. Align the teeth with the seam allowance so the teeth are positioned around 1.5 centimetres away from the centre back edge in this particular case. Ensure the zip teeth are standing upright and position the coil in the left groove of your zip foot or along the edge of your zip foot if you're using a slim single zip foot like shown in this video. Sew along this edge, taking extra care not to sew into the teeth. If you do sew into the teeth, you will need to stop, unpick and go back and start again. Once you get to the bottom of the zip, you will want to move the zip puller out of the way, so fasten your zip up and then reposition your zipper foot next to the zip teeth and complete stitching all the way to the bottom of the zip. Turn your fabric the right way and have a look and check that the zip teeth are barely visible once the fabric is folded back. Now move on to the next side. So here we are starting from the base of the zip and working our way back up the top. You want to ensure that the waist seams are aligned. Here, to make things easier, we are adding a basting stitch. A basting stitch is a stitch which is positioned halfway through the width of the zip tape and will allow you to ensure that the positioning of the zip tape is correct and help you when you actually sew your next row of stitching directly next to the zip teeth. You can of course use pins to position your zip tape in the right position, or if you feel confident enough you can skip this step entirely. Whatever you do, you need to ensure that the waist seams and the top of the zip are perfectly aligned. This will be really important to ensuring that the overall finish of your garment is as neat as possible. Once you've secured your zip tape in place, you can then start to sew directly next to the zip teeth, again making sure that the zip teeth are standing upright and that your needle doesn't hit the zip teeth. With your garment right side up, fasten the zip and check that the waistline and the top of the neck all align neatly and that the zip runs smoothly. Now to finish the centre back seam, with the garment wrong side out, move the end of the zip out of the way. Position the machine needle around 1 centimetre or so above the end of the zip stitching, with the needle as close to the zip as possible. Sew all the way down. Next we go on to create the gathered sections. To create your gathered sections, you can use whichever method you prefer. In this section, I am showing you how to make gathered tiers using a sharp point such as the end of your quick unpick or perhaps a chunky sewing needle. You gently force in the fabric, gathering it as you go, and sew along around ½ centimetre from the top of your cut fabric. You should use the longest stitch on your machine and also loosen the tension a little, which will make it easier when you need to adjust the gathering. Repeat this on all the tiered sections as necessary, trying to get your gathers as evenly spaced as possible. You can use the notches along the top of your fabric to help you with this. Once you have completed your gathering, check that you are happy with the size and that it matches the panel piece of the fabric that it needs to attach to. So in this case, this is attaching to tier 3. Here is a more common way to create gathers by putting your stitch length on the longest stitch length and a looser tension and pulling your fabric through so the stitches are nice and long and loose, and running this all the way through, again at around ½ centimetre away from the raw edge. Leave a long tail at the end and then you can slowly start pulling these tails to create the gather effect. This will take a little bit of time and patience, but rest assured you will get there. Just take care not to snap your thread whilst you're doing this. Using your hands, you can keep moving the fabric until you are happy with the spacing of the gathers. Make sure that it looks nice and even, and you can keep going back and forth until you are happy with this. You can tighten and loosen your thread as necessary to make sure that this panel piece fits with its corresponding piece. Once you are happy with the amount of gathers that you have created, take the corresponding piece and loosely hold it up to your gathered section and double check that you have created enough gathers, or if you have created too many, then you can start loosening it a little bit. When you are happy with your gathered section, lay it on top of its corresponding piece and start stitching at your seam allowance. You can use your notches to pin this in place to make sure that you have it all evenly spaced. Repeat this action on all of your gathered tiers until they are attached. Once you have completed attaching all of the gathered tiers to the sections, overlock these seams together and then press them upwards. Now to attach the pockets. With the right side of the body panel facing upwards, place the pocket with the right side down along the side seam of tier 1. The top of the pocket should be aligned with the notch. Pin this in place and sew all the way down. Repeat this on the back body panel. Once you've stitched them down, push the seam allowance onto the pocket bag edge and create a nice top stitch. Repeat this for all 4 pocket pieces. Next, we will move on to sew the shoulder seams and the side seams closed. Lay the front and back garment pieces on top of each other and check that the horizontal seams align at the waist and the tiers. Secure in place with pins if necessary. Now sew close the shoulder seams. Align the underarm points and sew at your seam allowance down the side seam. When you are nearing your pocket bags, just double check that the seams on both the front and the back match up as close as you possibly can. This will help to give you a nice neat finish to your garment. When you get to the pocket, sew 1.5 centimeters beyond the beginning of the pocket piece. This is to allow for your seam allowance around the pocket edge. Continue to sew around the pocket edge until you get all the way to the other end and continue your stitch line an extra 1.5 centimeters beyond the edge of where your garment starts. This will allow for the seam allowance running down the garment. Then continue to sew all the way down to the hem of your garment. Now let's move on to the neck facings. You will already have ironed the fusing onto your neck facing pieces. If you have the original version of the Mia dress pattern, your front neck facing will be in 2 pieces. You will need to attach those 2 pieces to create the V-neck point. Join your neck facings at the shoulder seams and then press these seams open. Unfasten your zip and lay your facing onto the garment with the right sides facing each other. Sew along the neckline to secure the facing to the body panels. Sew all the way along and ensure that your shoulder seams are pressed open on both the facing and the garment body. This will reduce the bulk at your shoulder. Take extra care at the V-point to ensure your stitch line also comes to a sharp V-point. It's really important that you take your time on getting this part of your sewing correct, as this will help for the V to be a nice neat finish and avoid you having a more gentler U-shaped neck. Once you have stitched down one side of the neck, with your needle down through the fabric, pivot at the V-neck point. Continue stitching all the way up the other side of the neck, ensuring that the shoulder seams align and that the seam allowances are spread open on both the facing and the body of the garment. Before attaching your facing at the centre back neck seam, from the right side, zip up the back of your garment and just check that you are happy with the top of the neck edge. If there's any discrepancy, now is the time where you can correct it. If you're okay, then go ahead and attach the facing at the centre back seam along the zip tape. To create a nice sharp corner, trim away some of the excess seam allowance. Cut at a diagonal to make this point less bulky, and then trim away half of your seam allowance along the neck edge. Go all the way around, carefully trimming. At the V point, you need to snip a notch as close to the stitch line as you possibly dare. Also, at the curved edges around the centre back neck, you need to cut some notches around 1.5 centimetres apart. This will help to give you a nice neat finish of your neckline, and the neck will sit nice and flat around the curves of your body. Now, starting at the centre back neck corner point, push all of the neck facing and the garment seam allowances onto the facing side, and from the right side add a nice neat row of top stitching along the facing neck edge. Sew as close as you can to the opposite corner, and then turn your garment the right side out and take a sharp object like the end of your scissor point, or maybe a screwdriver or a pen with its cap on, and poke out the point so you have a nice sharp corner. Do this on the opposite side also. The Mia dress has a fitted sleeve, therefore there is some ease in the sleeve head. To help you manage this, with your stitch tension loose and on the longest stitch length, add a small gathering stitch along the top of the sleeve head in between the notches. This will help to just create a gentle curve of the fabric, which will help you when fitting the sleeve into the armhole opening. In this tutorial we are making the long sleeve version, however the steps are exactly the same if you're making the short sleeve. So starting from your underarm point, sew down all the way to the cuff point and finish with a back stitch. Repeat on the opposite sleeve. To attach the sleeve to your armhole, place your sleeve inside your armhole so the right sides of the fabric are touching each other. You can use pins to match up the notches and make sure that the sleeve fits perfectly into the armhole. Using your gathering stitch that you did earlier, you can tighten or loosen by pulling the thread ends to help handle the ease at the sleeve head. However, make sure you don't have any visible gathers when you're doing this. Now you will sew in a circle all the way round, starting from the underarm point. Check that your notches match up and keep sewing in a continuous line. Repeat this process on the opposite armhole. When you have finished inserting your sleeve into the armhole, you can take your garment and try it on to make sure that you are happy with the length of the sleeve and the length of the overall garment, because next we will move on to hemming. First, let's start by hemming the sleeve. So with the wrong side of the garment facing upwards, take your raw edge and turn it once under by 1.5 centimeters, and then again by another 1.5 centimeters. Now, slowly and carefully stitch all the way round. You can use pins or you can press this in place to help you. For a neat finish, sew as close to the folded edge as possible, maintaining an equal distance between the foot and the bottom folded edge as possible. This way, when you turn your garment the right side out, your stitch line will look nice and evenly spaced from the edge of the cuff. Repeat this step on the opposite cuff. Now do exactly the same on the hem. Take your time because this is quite a wide hem. Stitch along your folded edge, keeping an equidistance from the bottom edge. You have now come to the end of this video tutorial. I really hope that you have enjoyed it and that especially you enjoy wearing your Mia dress. It's one of my absolute favourites and I'd love to see how your make went. So don't forget to tag me on Instagram at MakeWithMandy.